Tony Sefton from Vision XS joins us from close to Oxford, London. Hi, Tony. Nice to see you.
Hi, Sabina.
Hello. Tony and I go back a long way. Tony, I think it's till 2004, 5, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I was thinking which intro story I could use, but I probably won't.
All of it involved wine, including the bottle of wine we had in Paris last year in September after the International Attractions Conference, where I persuaded you to fly out to South Africa and join our conference. So I'm sorry you haven't been able to fly out, but really appreciative of the fact that you're able to join us virtually.
Yeah, no problem. It's a pleasure, a privilege.
Great. So just a little bit about Tony and Vision XS. Tony Sefton has been 25 years in the attractions industry. His background is actually as an engineer, but he's done amazing foresight work in how people engage with attractions in terms of the quality and the quantity of experience that you offer on site. I've always learned so much from you, Tony. He's had clients ranging from Disney, from Dubai Land, and actually quite a lot of clients in South Africa, Two Oceans Aquarium, Table Mountain Cableway, Gold Reef City, and I think Pretoria Zoo. So Tony, I always look forward to your presentations. I learn something new every single time. Thanks for joining us, and we'll definitely have that glass of wine when we can, wherever we can. So I'm looking forward to what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. Well, I'd just reiterate, thank you for the opportunity to be able to share some of what we've learned over the years. We're actually putting it all in a book at the moment, so that will be out about this time next year to celebrate our actual 25th anniversary, which is coming up. I'm going to take you through a little bit of the story of how we started and how we came around, just a little background, because I know you have a very strong IAAPEA link, which is good. My screen didn't change. Technical people, if that's a problem here, that's a good start. My PC has locked up. Well, I'm just going to start telling the story anyway. We started in 1996 with a grant actually from IAAPEA, and we were very privileged. We basically asked the question, why do people come to attractions? If you're a theme park and you put in a new roller coaster, how many more people that will bring? If you're a heritage attraction and you put in a theatre to tell the story, all that kind of stuff. And they were very kind to be able to give us a grant. And we started our first, we got the chairman's grant in 1996. The company was formed, and we did our first research there about what people liked and didn't like. And I'll show you some of the more recent data on that later. But as Sabina said, I probably came at the world from a little bit more of a mathematical and engineering point of view. You can see the first amusement ride I designed in my early 20s there on the right. But then we got into really the whole maths and the experience. We developed computer software to look at human experience, and we'll show you some of that, some of the outputs there. But the software itself wasn't everything it was needed to be until we learned to start linking to the economics, about stay length, about dwell time, about secondary spends and all the economic things. So gradually over the years, we developed more data to support the experience side as well. So, and we grew and we traveled the world. And as Sabina said, we had enjoyed working in many, many countries, and we still do. Then it all changed in around 2008. I got the offer to lead or set up a project in London, which is due to open in 2024, which is a Paramount Pictures project. I was the founding shareholder and set the project up. In 2013, I led that project until some lovely people from Q8 bought it, and they've taken the project since. So 2013, after almost having 3-4 years out of doing lots of strategies, we kind of went back to our first love, which is experience and business planning. And just a heads up, Sabina met one of my sons who's going to be joining the business. He's like a better maths version of me. And my other son's going to be joining the business as well, and he's into master planning. So the next generation is starting to come through. And it's those links between disciplines that we actually love. And I'll talk much more about that as we go through. So here we go. You're going to see this a lot, and I apologize for all the graphs and the charts that you're about to see, but I will, I'll try and make them clear. So all the strategies we do and all of the operations, whether you're in destination planning, it's lovely to see that some people from Kenya here. We have 2 projects in Kenya at the moment, projects in Canada. It doesn't matter whether you're doing a country tourism, regional tourism, whether you're a theme park, a museum, a zoo, a science centre, a heritage site, or anything else that fits in this thing of tourism. These models apply to you. And there's an overlap between the models, and it's those overlaps that often will define how successful you are. Now, a lot of people do this intuitively. What our mission has been is to try to understand, for example, the cost model and the experience model, how much you invest in experience, how does that affect the business model, and so on and so forth. And there are a lot of relationships between these models that will actually define how successful. And if you're looking at a new thing, you're looking at a project, reducing the risk. Sadly, a lot of people out there only ever do these things sequentially. So they will come up with a concept, they will then do a master plan, they will then write a business model, they'll then cobble together something on experience, and then they'll look at the market or any combination. This process is about, that we would advocate to do it really, really well, is all about integration between these models. It's an iterative process. So here's an example. I want to buy or extend my business, do something amazing. I want to get 250,000 visitors to our attraction. It'll cost $5 million to build in the cost model. I get the funds, we build the project. When we reopened, attendance numbers were only 120,000 in year 1, and we were way short of our 250,000 total. Guests complained about waiting and a poor experience generally. We had to lay off staff and could not repay our loans and went bust after 14 months of trading. Here's the painful thing, people. I didn't make that up. That's a real story. I did the business recovery. That's what happens when you think sequentially and you don't do it. This was a project in London. It's now trading very well, but it needed a lot of turning around. Here's my graph of death for those of you operators. If you've got a graph like this of your annual attendance, then you will know exactly what I'm talking around. You reach your peak, you level off for a few years, and gradually you start to see the decline. And the graph of death, as we call it, is all around an accelerating decline in your numbers, okay? And this is terminal. At the point of the red line, it becomes, there's a point in the business, the organisation isn't viable. And that doesn't matter whether you're a not-for-profit, that could be about subsidy, or it could be around you're a commercial operator and you just can't afford to trade, okay? So how do you stop that? The answer is how you stop that is by getting the business model and the things right. So just some potted things that we've learned around the world. Good investment in experience, because investment in experience is absolutely essential. Here's lovely Gold Reef City in Johannesburg. I think it was 2005 I first came to Johannesburg, and I was called in to help the owning group, as they were then, to look at it. And they had the wrong business model, basically the wrong economic model. They were charging tickets, but all of the food and beverage, everything on site, all of the retail was all concessions. So the concessions were only contributing less than 5% towards the revenue, and they were trying to buy expensive European rides on African emission prices and no food and beverage income. Okay, so we changed that, and with a lot of pain there initially, but gradually we managed to turn that around. Here's a lovely example in the UK. Here, this wonderful eco park doesn't use electricity, any of those things, even the roller coaster. And that's a quiz for you later in Meet the Speaker. Tell me how you do a roller coaster without any power. That train weighs, full of people, weighs about 16 tons. Yeah, the solutions there were they didn't have car parks, didn't have toilets. So we learned some painful lessons there about if you get the market model right, you've got to have the infrastructure in order to deal with it. Okay, here's a bit of a horror story that ended up well. Here, the management team decided to build a giant admissions entrance thing. They didn't invest in experience. They decided they wanted to build a huge, huge entrance porch. And the business, pretty much the Zoological Society, pretty much went bust. The management team, the trustees had to change. I'm pleased to say that they now do invest in their visitor experience. They've got a great team there. They've had a tough year this year, as we all have, but they will come through it, and they're now investing in the experience, and they've managed to turn that around. Even the big boys get it wrong. My really, really good friend, John Holland, was parachuted in to turn this around. It looks great when it's done by a designer, a master plan, but there were so many inherent errors. They hadn't built the main roads big enough. They didn't have enough capacity. Real school of hard knocks here when this opened. It's now a wonderful park, and they did turn it around, but it wasn't right. So even the big guys get it wrong. Okay, let's have a quick look at the market model. I don't know why I started this. You could start at any of the models, but predicting how many people will come is not a guessing game. It's around stats and it's around numbers. And it's the links. And here's the key bit. You cannot predict the attendance unless you understand how much is invested in experience, what the quality of the experience is like, and all those other factors. Just saying, I've got this amount of people in my area and I'll get that percentage of them to come is not enough, okay, for lots and lots of reasons. But here, you know, the influence on how many people come across the attraction is very important. So here are 3 simple ways that can be done. I mentioned looking at the market size, that's very important. But when you look at the market size and you say, I've got 1 million people in the market and I expect, that's 1 million residents and tourists, and I expect 10% of them to come, so therefore I'm expecting 100,000 people, that's okay. But if there's already 25 of the type of attractions within that market, and that market will only stand a certain amount, the market penetration isn't enough. So be wary of just doing market penetration on its own. A proper gap analysis of the area is needed as well. Marketing spend, how much you spend on marketing. It's amazing how many new facilities have launched or how many people haven't reached their ideal optimum attendance because they haven't invested enough in marketing. So there's an amount of visitors that will come per head that you spend on marketing. It's really important to understand that. And finally, here, just in these 3 examples, there are about 6 of them that we use. Capital spend, how much we invest in visitor experience. That's not in drains, that's not in toilets, that's not in car parks. Okay, how much you actually spend on visitor experience is a really good way of looking and working out how many people will come. So there's an amount of capital that you spend per visitor. So here is a typical population map that you can get from most governments. And it shows, we look at the 60-minute population time. So to do market penetration, you say, well, if there's 1 million people in there, in fact, it's 740 something, how many of those will come? And the great thing is that since the 1970s, for museums, for zoos, for theme parks, pretty much every type of attraction, there's a lot of data out there, and you can compare your market penetration that you're expecting in your numbers or how many you've currently got to how many you could get. So, you know, and you can look at the best in the world or the best in your region, and you can say, well, the best is getting 25% or 12%, therefore we won't go beyond that in our plan. So 100% optimization would be you've got the same as the kind of best in class in your sector. And then if you're going to go beyond that, okay, that's called induced demand. You've got to have really good reasons. That's where you need the experience model. That's where you need amazing delivery of staff. You need absolutely everything right if you're going to go beyond that. And we do see examples of that. So here's a UK example on that capital investment. So for a farm attraction, a rural attraction, if you're going to put a play area in, then for about every £16 you spend on capital, you'll get a new visitor. If you're doing buildings, that might go up to £42. You can see there's an amount, and this is from our database. And you can actually reverse engineer this in your attraction. So if you do operate a zoo, you can look at your investments into experience over the last 10 years. You can look and see how much we invested, 500 million in this, 100,000 in that, whatever the figures are, and you can work out the capex per visitor and the increase in attendance. We do this all the time. It's a really useful tool for calculating your visitors. Okay, now I mentioned market penetration is flawed. It's flawed because it doesn't take into account all the competition. Okay, this is called a gap market. So any population consisting of tourists and residents will generate a certain amount of visits. Those visits will be distributed amongst different types of attractions. You've got supply and demand, which is how you do a gap model, okay? So you can calculate how many, what the existing supply is, and then you can also look at other systems, compare what the demand is, and then you can look at gaps. So in this particular example, if you're planning to build a family entertainment centre or a theme park or some adventure tourism in this market, you wouldn't do very well. If you wanted to do an agritourism, a farm attraction in the market, there's a little gap, but really the huge gap is in museum and science centre. Okay, there's an example, or zoos, or even extreme parks. Okay, so I would definitely advocate doing gap analysis in the ways I've said. On to another way of looking at the world. Okay, you can break down your annual attendance into a cumulative frequency graph of the type of days, okay, and how many days they have. So here's a typical example. This place operates probably 250, 300 days a year, okay. Its biggest days, the band E days, we call these, it's only got 40 of them. It's got, whereas the other end, where the attendance is very small, it's got 158 days, okay? You can basically break it down, and it's really interesting to see the number of days you have by different bands, because once you've done that, you can then change the way, and this very much links the market model to the business model and the operations model. So suddenly you can say, well, on that band day, a band E day, when we've got 18,000 people through, how many times do we need to clean the toilets? How many people do we need on car parking? How many bread rolls, litres of soup, burgers do we need prepping? How many staff do we need to deliver that? You can actually set up for each type of band the degree of operation you do it, and then you optimize it. Because if you go back, and this is one of the troubles I had when I've done business recoveries, when I look at the small days, and a lot of businesses are majorly overstaffed throughout those small days, that's when the problems come. You can also look at this cumulative frequency graph, and you can then compare it with which of these days do you actually break even. So if you only break even on a band D day and make money on a band E day, I guarantee that your attraction will not have enough to reinvest annually, and it won't go forward, okay? So some useful stuff, using the stats and the numbers to support your strategy. Okay, on to the experience model. So we have psychologists that run our models, and it's a mixture of capacity and, as Sabina said, experience quality and experience quantity. So, and it affects all of your models in so many different ways, because obviously it affects the value of that guests can be what you can charge. It determines the quality of experience, actually determines how many people will come, how much your operations costs need to run the experience, and how much space you need as well. So everything is connected. So we have a number of different areas that we look at, and we love modelling human experience, and we're learning the whole time. I'd say doing this now for nearly 25 years, we learn something every week. Every time we run a model, we learn something, we collect it, we look at the data. And these are all the different areas that the experience model looks at. And it's often the missing link in many, many projects whereby people pay lip service. They think the experience side is a narrative on the visitor flow, or they think it's working out how many experiences they are from a simple spreadsheet. And that is how the experience model is done. It's much, much more than that. As I'll demonstrate. We have this fun tool. Every single line item, every single museum exhibit or theme park ride or zoo exhibit, whatever it is, has about 130 items of data in this. It's put in, it's a mathematical model, it needs calibrating. And the way the model works is it looks at people time, how much people time. So you're trying to balance the people time, and calibrating the model is always challenging on projects that don't work very well, whereas good projects that deliver amazing visitor experience always calibrate fairly quickly. So yeah, and the calibration process, we check capacities, we check psychology, and it produces about 60 pages of results, okay? So like I said at the start, doing this properly can make a big difference in looking at projects. Some of the key outputs, here's some example from Sentosa Island in Singapore. the model predicts how people spend their time. So how much time is active in queuing, amenities, spectating, and transient time walking around, okay? And, you know, there comes a point in every attraction, we call it the tipping point, TP stood there. So in this case of Sentosa, when we looked originally and modelled the tipping point, as in the point where every visitor that comes on the island is added to a queue and adds and causes, you know, more operational challenges and the visitor experience goes down, we were able to move that from 43 to 70,000 by adding more capacity on the site and looking at the distribution. Capacity is very, very important. Here's an example, my favourite show, the Lion King show in Disney's Animal Kingdom. Okay, here's how capacity affects this. We call this effectiveness, this example, very, very simple. And the definition of that is the percentage of people that want to do the show, talk, ride or activity that can do it on a design day. So a design day is your typical busy day. There is a mathematical definition, but that's probably good for now. So this particular venue has 1,500 seats, 7 shows a day. When we looked at it, they've actually expanded it since. 10,500 people through in a day at 85% occupancy, because you never fill all these theatres. It gets nearly 9,000 people through in a day. The annual attendance at the time we looked was nearly 11 million at Animal Kingdom. A design day had 66,000 people in, and it could only operate. So the operating effectiveness, the percentage of people that could do it, that could get through it, is 13.4, which is why they built a new venue. It just wasn't big enough. Very popular show, still very popular, and you have to queue up a good time before on a design day. I think they've managed to double that operating effectiveness by building the new venue. Now, other ways. So for attractions less than 4 hours, you need to be delivering 2+ experiences per hour, okay? For attractions with greater than, you need to consider. So obviously, if you look at the Disney example there, obviously you spend more time in Disney. So those attractions ideally would hit 30 to 40% of people that want to do that attraction could do that attraction. Whereas in smaller dwell time attractions, in smaller museums and stuff, 60 to 70% effectiveness is fine. And these are figures can really affect your social media, connected to a lot of things. If people can't get on the thing they expected to come to do, you're going to get trouble and you're not going to be popular. Here's a lovely example that came out of running the experience model. This is again going back to Greenwood. A lot of psychological elements involved in this and no electricity. You can see the family navigating their way around the swamp by pulling on ropes and paddling. This is an example of the data that drives that. So believe it or not, that picture shows so many different psychological elements that you need to understand in order to do it. So it's got social interaction, it's got physical activity, it's got closeness to water. There's probably about 30 different psychological elements in that. We do research around the world, 20 different countries, as to what the elements are needed in different countries. So you can see here, the figure on the left, I left them out, you can guess, is China, 26 to 40-year-olds. You can see those are the ideal elements that the Chinese would want. And the top right here is the Germans. Very different set of elements. And my point here is this is quite complicated. So if you're designing an attraction, it's pretty hard and you're doing either for local or for international tourists. Knowing what people like and don't like is very difficult to understand. And you can see the two lists are quite different. There we go. Now, what you're able to do then, once you've understood what people want, you're able to compare with what the experience actually delivers. Okay, and we have this traffic light system: red unacceptable, orange okay, and green ideal. And the world class there line is the sort of best in class that we see by different sectors. So there is a way mathematically of looking at the psychology of your experience and working out the quality. And this is an even more sophisticated way of working out how many people will come to your attraction or not. And this goes back to our research 20 odd years ago. Here's an example of Flawed, a major international festival. There's a list of elements here. The two left, the left element here is what child elements needed to improve the child experience. The middle one is what adults needed, and the right was the average of adults and children. And you can see how these different elements added to adding cable cars and more experiential stuff, elements of fantasy, all sorts of stuff were added into Flawed. This happens every 12 years. We've also worked on the one for 2022. And again, they're moving the experiential stuff on there as well. And once you know this, you can then start to predict in a much more detailed way visitor flow around your site. You can break that down into so many different ways. And I'm going to show you some examples of that now. We call that visitor journey. So how the visitor journey works is that, as I mentioned, you can actually track people in your facility. You can do research either via technology or one visitor following visitors and tracking what they do. But here's an example of somebody going through an attraction. They spent 63% of the time active, 25% in amenity time, that's restaurants and retail and stuff, and then eventually, about 10% of their time walking around. So you can then plot that into the highs and lows. And Bernard quite rightly said the welcome is important, as is our psychologists talk about that as primacy in psychological terms, and recency, the end of the experience. You can plot the highs and lows, and here you can see this visitor journey is a little bit patchy. It starts well, it's then got a middle patch, and it doesn't end very well. I guarantee those people on that visitor journey wouldn't remember. You can then plot here other different things, visitor journey and blood sugar levels. If you want to go really technical, where should you place your restaurants? How spacing, when do people need to eat and be fed if you've got a longer dwell time stuff? Okay, you'd be amazed at the stuff you can plot on this stuff. Anybody have an idea what this one is? This is time on your feet. A lot of our attractions, we spend 60, 70% time on our feet. You're able to calculate that. You can calculate that by looking. Here's an example of understanding the visitor time, and you can say, right, here's how we calculate standing time by looking at, and you've done the tracking studies, you've understood. So that decides, this is why shows don't work in the morning, because people are happy to work in the morning. Shows work much better, and sit down stuff in the afternoon if you're a day visit. Again, there's maths behind this stuff. You don't need to guess it. One more. Love this. Psychological appeal. Staff interaction. How often are you delivered? Modern experiences are delivered, okay? Authentic, delivered, real people delivering experiences. How often do your visitors in your visitor journey actually get to meet your staff, those people with a sparkle in their eye? Okay, here's an example of the Big Sheep in the UK. It does this amazing, it's agritourism, it does this amazing show. It takes you through the history of sheep and different types of sheep and grazing and how we look after sheep and everything else. Okay. You can look at the value of experience. So an expensive experience in the UK will cost you £25 an hour. If you want to go to the cinema, it costs you £5.50 an hour, about that. Okay. The value of a low-level talk in attractions, just a simple keeper talk in a zoo maybe, will be £2.50 an hour. So you can see there's a big variation here. Let's say the Big Sheep show is a good quality show, and it's got production. So let's say it's £12.50 an hour for the show. Okay, now here's some more maths. The theatre capacity has 380, does 2 shows a day, 760 people through. The value per show, because it's a 30-minute show, is £6.25 per visitor. Okay, that show generates 380 people hours a day. Okay. At £6.25, that's generating £2,800 worth of value of experience, okay? On a design day with 1,200 people on the site, the ticket receipts is 10,000. So that one show is roughly getting on for a third of the value of the ticket value of that experience. It's another way of using the experience model linked into the cost model. Shows can be really, really key. Lots of ways of looking at The other way is to say, well, if you put a new attraction in, like the bird show in Singapore, and you get no increase in attendance, this particular case, a 1.5% increase in attendance, but there's ways of calculating increase in value time from, or dwell time in your site for a show, which suddenly means that you can say, well, the payback on this particular show is 10 years. Okay, again, the maths are very simple, but very powerful when you're going to your board or your investors to say, yeah, I've calculated what the return on investment on this new show is. And that's linked to a change in dwell time here. A little bit maybe spend increases in ticket price and revenue and other things, okay? So a very, very simple analogy, but a way of calculating with the experience model into the value of experience. Staff are super important. And investing in staff and delivery can be really, really essential. And again, Bernard talked about that, and we couldn't agree more with what he said. It's essential. So sometimes it's not about investing in new things; it's about investing in delivering the experience you do better. And there's lots of great examples in South Africa and across Africa of amazing delivered experiences. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm conscious of time, and you've seen enough graphs and charts, but you can calculate, do you have the right amount of toilets? Do you have the right amount of serving capacity? Because your guests are not going to have a great day if they have to wait 45 minutes for lunch, if they can't get to a toilet when they need to, okay? So getting this stuff right is also very, very important. It's almost like the basics. Now, cost model. This is about investment. It could be new attractions. It could be value engineering. It could be working out the return on investment, like I just said, for the business model linked to the experience model. Here's an example going on about the staff. This is the Sonara Desert Museum in Arizona. One of my favorite stories. I went there, I was doing the model. It was very, very hot. I had gone through, I was there to look at their new $10 million geological exhibition. And I've got to say, I was really underwhelmed. Until I went outside and there was a volunteer and she had a tray of rocks, okay? And she had a bony finger and she beckoned me over. I was the only one, and she started to tell me about the history of time through her tray of rocks. She had a sparkle in her eye. She had passion for geology. I've got to say, I was there for maybe 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. And by the time I'd finished, she had a crowd of about 20, 30, 40 people, I don't know, a big crowd, all engaged with her wonderful, under her shady tree. And we were all suffering the heat because her talk was so good. Actually, I realized she was doing a better job than the $10 million geological museum that they put in. And it turned out they'd put the museum in to replace that. So her name was Julia. So she was up against a $10 million operation that had 5 minutes dwell time, educational value, 1 in 10. The capital cost of Julia was probably for the day, $50 to $70. Don't forget her $6 lunch. The dwell time with her was 20 minutes and the educational value was 8 out of 10. Sometimes throwing money at a problem isn't necessarily the answer. So how you invest your money is very important. Visitor experience could be staff or it could be new projects, okay? That's obvious. Infrastructure is always needed. Yes, as I said, you need the right amount of toilets, parking. It's about safety, drains, all that kind of stuff. You can't not have it. Obviously, visitor experience drives attendance. Dwell time is central to all the models, educate and entertain. But also making sure your model, you're investing enough in commercial. So every strategy should consider what proportion of the investment over a period of time is being put into these different things. And that might look in a strategy very, very simply saying, year 1, we're going to focus on experience. Year 2 is infrastructure. Year 3 is commercial. That's a bit cliche, but you might end up with an attraction, a very simple strategy that says, here's how we're going to look at these 5 years. What are we going to try to achieve in each of these different years? And how's that going to affect our business overall? Onto the space model. This is where you need good designers, good architects. We work with a genius called Ray Hole, who specializes as an architect, not building buildings. Okay, the environment that you use, how you use the space, how much visitors you've got per square meter, the circulation of visitors around, how you cleverly use indoor and outdoor space, all those kind of things come into the space model. So here's a theatre that cost very, very little. The bird show I showed you in Singapore was considerably more expensive. Here's a little theatre for 400 people and works on a peak day. That can change your income mix. I'm just jumping around. That can change your income mix. It can change the dwell time. It can change, dwell time and food spend is proportional. So the longer people spend. So if you're less than 4 hours dwell time and people don't stay for lunch, your spend will be about half of what it is if you take the lunch in. If you can get the evening meal and a breakfast, then your spend will be very different again. So dwell time and spending. And here, looking at the business model, the final model, the sweet spot is about dwell time for day visitor attractions. Obviously now, as our visitor economy evolves, we're talking about moving dwell time to stay length. And a lot of our friends and projects we work with around the world are adding accommodation. Why? Because it changes the economics and the business model. But looking here at the business model, it's about returns, it's about being economically sustainable, and it's about economic impact. We've got 2 wonderful projects in Kenya. These are around creating jobs and employment, creating a good business, protecting natural habitat, all kind of things driven from the business model. And, looking at the income mix here, top left, is a business that's quite vulnerable because it's a day visitor attraction. It only has 3 or 4 types of income. Whereas look at the one to the bottom right. This is much more robust. It has premium activities. It has accommodation, okay? This business, the bottom right, will have a lot less fluctuations in its economic history going forward than the one top left, okay? So changing the business model is often very, very key when you're strategic planning. Okay, so yes, you will get all the EBITDAs, profit and loss, cash flows, and all those kind of things. But think fundamentally, do we have the right business model? Gold Reef City didn't have the right business model. It needed changing, okay? And we did change it, and it's obviously still going strong today. When you come to business models as well, sensitivities, yes, you can put in your target numbers of what you want to achieve, but actually drive the model low. What's your break-even model? How low in terms of visitors can you still be economically sustainable? And that obviously is improved if you've got accommodation and other things in your business model. These are vital, and I think I've now done 17 full-on business recoveries worldwide. And every time I see that the value of the company, the visitors' attendance in those, the lack of investment and experience has always been sort of key challenges in terms of why those businesses have failed, or sadly because the feasibility was wrong in the first place and you could never attain the attendance predictions. But sensitivities are important. And those of you who are what I call real operators and not advisors like us will know that cash flow is important and modelling cash flow is essential. Gosh, I've raced through so many charts and so many things that you've probably seen enough graphs and charts. I'm not sure anybody else will throw as much at you in terms of numbers and graphs and charts, but that was my job today. I hope that's been useful. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be able to share some of the stuff. I'm looking forward to meeting you some of you in the Meet the Speaker slots. If that doesn't work, we are available. We're going to go online to watch the rest of the conference today. My colleague, Diana, is one of the delegates. So if you do need to reach me through the day, just message her via the delegate list, and we're around, and we look forward to chatting. I've got a little bit of time for 1 or 2 questions, if Sabina will allow. And I didn't tell any story, Sabs.
Oh, there's so many, but thank goodness you're keeping those quiet. Tony, I can honestly say my heart rate is raised because I just love the stuff. I love the stuff. I love the science behind it. And as you said, there's maths behind the stuff. You don't need to guess it. It just makes me so mad. I was recently at an attraction in South Africa who invested heavily into the experience, the welcome center, okay? Beautifully built, amazing. But it doesn't connect with the experience at all. And they have put a lot of money into this thing. And it makes me angry, cross, and it's because in South Africa, and I'm going to say this because I just get emotional about it, we don't accept that there's a science behind this.
Yeah.
We just It's been years now. Come on, guys.
Absolutely.
Just connect with people who've got the science.
I was literally going to say that one thing that I learned from your presentation, Tony, is that there's a method to the madness. It's what provides the credibility, and I think it's. Yeah.
So really, we've got to all
behind wonderful people like you need boring people like me.
I loved your idea for those rides without electricity. We're on backup here. We've got load shedding, so that would really work in South Africa. And the other favorite pet grump of mine is, because I worked with you, Tony, on many farm parks in the UK. And we don't have farm parks in South Africa, and we could do so well with them. Give us a quick 2-minute thing of what a farm park is, because it's not a concept here. We've got one that's really good. It's the George Strawberry Farm. They do so well. And I just think there's a massive market for that here. Tony, quick 2 minutes on farm parks. I know it's off topic.
Sure, yeah.
What is it? What it is. People here don't know what it is.
Okay, it's a day visitor attraction where you come and you explore the farm, but you add in indoor play, outdoor play. I showed you a sheep show. That was an educational show about how you look after cattle or sheep. You might have animal petting, so you can meet the animals. You've got interactives and exhibition areas about how you farm, how you grow food. A lot of the farm attractions now are doing fun stuff about farm to fork, they call it. How does the food get on our plate? And relating that to a lot of world issues and other stuff as well. Yeah. So there's a strong educational, but you take a young family and they're just fun.
Yeah, they're fun.
They're good businesses. They're the quickest return of businesses in the leisure industry.
I remember learning that from you all those years ago. And it speaks to my other pet topic, which is healthy, safe leisure experiences for our domestic market. Farm parks are the answer, but hey, okay. Tony, I've got 2 questions here quickly. One is from Melody. The time between recommending and implementation is a challenge. Any advice to help accelerate acceptance and implementation of new business model strategy?
Yeah, this takes a while. You're quite right, Melody. We do it all the time, and we've noticed over the years that the adoption of a new strategy or a new business thing, you need to allow time for the management team, the owners, the directors to go through. And I think that can be helped by really getting a very sound, strong, well laid out business case, experience case, cost model. So you've looked at all the angles. You've been realistic about the impact that it will have on the business as well. So you've done the homework so that people aren't left when you're doing a presentation to the board or the owners that you're saying, well, they've got questions, unanswered questions. And I think being robust in the evidence that you present also helps that process. But even then, when you've done that, it takes time.
And one last question. What are some of the most common ways to extend dwell time at a facility? Because we know dwell time leads to secondary
this is
spend.
really important. I kind of galloped over it a little bit for time, but basically the more you spend dwell time, the more you can charge for the experience. So if you add 20% more dwell time, you can charge 20% more on your ticket revenue, okay? Very crudely, and you'll probably get 20% more in catering. You won't in retail. Retail spends tends to say the same. So how can you do more? What you want to do if you want to extend dwell time is you want to put in something that everybody on the site will like to do. So I always quote the example of a maze. So you put a maze in, and the maze, say it takes half an hour to do. You've actually added half an hour. If everybody does it, you've added half an hour for everybody on the average dwell time. But it's not just that half an hour in the maze. It's the time to walk to and from the maze. It's the extra time you're there. You might be a bit hungry. You might stop for some food or go. So suddenly, for every half an hour you add of active time, you might have added another half an hour of transient amenity another time. So by adding that one component, you've extended your dwell time by 1 hour. And if you were a 3 hour going to a 4 hour, suddenly people are staying for lunch and your business case is so much stronger. So things that have long dwell time and high effectiveness, as I talked about in the talk, are the things you need. So things that everyone can do and that have a long dwell time. So adding a short ride, a roller coaster, does not add much dwell time unless you're adding a lot of queue time. Whereas an exhibit in a museum won't do it. A new show in a museum or something that takes longer to do.
Thanks, Tony. Well, food for thought as always. All our talks are available on the app for the next 6 months to anybody who was a delegate. I know I'm going to go through your slides slowly and have a look at every single one. There's so much information there. Tony, I'm going to have to say goodbye. I know you're joining us in the Meet the Speaker, and I know you are actually going to be online and watching the next conference. We have to kick you out to get our next speaker in because you've got to get on another Zoom link. So I don't want to be rude, but I have to say goodbye. Thanks again. Lovely to see you.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you. And yeah, really hope we can catch up in real life sometime.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.